Blue face, baby. Yeah, I'm every woman's fantasy. Blue face, baby. Mama always told me I was gonna break hearts. I guess surf off stupid. Don't be mad at me, I wanna see you bust down. Bend that shit over on the desk. Yeah, make that shit clap. She threw it back, so I had to double back on the gang. Smacking high off the drug. I tried to tell myself 2 times enough. Then the nigga relapsed on the dead low. Ain't no running, Tatiana. You gon' take me, damn sure, Tatiana. I beat the pussy up, now it's a murder scene. Keep shit player, Tatiana, like you ain't never even heard of me. But bust down.
Motherfucking check 1 2, check 1 2. Do you hear me loud and clear? You are now tuned into the toughest, the most powerful reptile podcast in the damn hobby. Couple reasons, right? We have Coldblood Cafe's Steven. We have Reptex Steven. We have Reptex Desiree. Where am I going? We have Reptex fucking, they're here. And they're my team. They're here. You know what I mean? I'm talking about the new breed, powerful shit.
That intro is so hard.
It is so hard.
So hard.
It's almost as hard as fucking Steven's look. What's up? You know what's also hard is our shirts are just fucking, they're just so uniform now. It's like, you know what I mean? I don't even know I was wearing it. I had no clue. Oh, here it is. Fuck.
I've been working out, MJ.
Yo, you got the meal prep? Hey, good for you, Des.
Look at that.
You've been holding yourself, keeping yourself committed. What's up with you, Bubs? You still going to the gym?
Yeah.
He's my trainer.
Damn. And what a good trainer to have, man.
Yeah, he's hardcore.
You know, it's also hardcore. The fucking one of the best fucking sponsors you could even pick. First and foremost, when it comes to the rodents, that's www.coldbloodcafe.com. Freshest and the best. It's delivered to your doorstep. $30 flat rate shipping. Day one pinks to the fucking whale shark rats. Yeah, I just said all right. You got eggs, put them fucking bad boys in a sim container, man. www.simcontainer.com. Proven fact, eggs will hatch out of a sim box. And then habitat-wise, Focus 3, the future of fucking arboreal habitat. Super light. Yes, Desiree?
Say cubed. Focus cubed.
Focus habitat. Focus cube habitat. I've been fucking forgetting the cube this entire time.
Yeah, you've been saying it wrong the whole time. And I finally said, I'm going to correct him this time.
Thanks. That's what's up. You know what I mean? I need people to correct me when I'm saying wrong.
I am here for you.
So when everyone's watching and or listening to this, we will have received our first shipment of Focus Cubed habitats yesterday.
Sick.
Tomorrow as of now, yesterday as of when you're listening.
Yeah.
Or if you're listening in the future, however long ago. But we are about to experience the Focus Cubed habitat for the first time, and I would like to say we are pumped. So
I would like to say I'm sorry.
Some basins in them.
I just want to say sorry to Steven and Ashley for not saying cube this entire time. But cube, it's in there.
You called me Ashley.
No.
The owner's name Ashley.
Oh God.
Steven.
And
It's confusing.
Oh God, I got so confused. His name is P-H-E-N though.
Yes.
It is. It is.
You put it on the freight label. So
yeah, I know.
She did, I should say.
Okay, I'm good. I'm good.
Super mind-boggling. Dude, tonight
4 minutes and 20 seconds of pure gold. I'm just gonna say that much. off to a blazing.
Hey, we're in the reptile room. Did you notice?
Yeah, it's way harder than your kitchen.
My dad roasted me on the background. I talked to him. I was like, I was just talking to him, just normal. And then he called me back 10 minutes later, and he's like, "Hey, I was watching the podcast. Your background sucks. Real entertaining." He's like, "That's it. All right, bye." I'm like, "Okay, thanks, Dad." Like,
shout out to Papa Kush for being as real as he needed to be to his son.
Yeah.
So it's like, all right. Now we've been called out like that, so I
Yeah.
guess we got to change up the scenery. The lighting is definitely better.
It is better.
Des was moving like the cart with
Yeah,
the
we're on the reptile
computer
cart right
around
now.
for a bit to try to find the lighting, and I think we need to get those light boxes or whatever. But for now, this is as good as it's going to get in here. So
All right, we're 5 minutes deep. What the fuck's up with tonight's guest, bro? What is up with tonight's guest? Shout out to Steven. He hella gets the assist on this because he definitely was like, yo, MJ, monitor time. Knock it off. Brandon, Van Asten. This is where it's at. What do you know about tonight's guest, Steven?
So obviously, we here are huge monitor people, and one of the favorites I feel like across the board for most people, us included, are the tree monitors.
Yes.
And if there's anybody really, I'd say almost in the world who's known for tree monitors, it's this guy. Not to mention Odatria, the dwarf monitor species like Pilbara rock monitors, Kimberley rock monitors, Aki monitors.
Right.
The bunch of Prasinus, the green tree monitors we just hatched, the female came from Brandon. So
Woo!
solid animals.
Yeah, and he's fucking repping Canada, and he's here tonight, man. We have Brandon from fucking Canadian Coldblood. How you doing tonight, Brandon?
Hey, great guys. How you doing?
Oh,
Pretty good.
excited.
Good.
You know, energy's there for you tonight, man. We're stoked to have you, bro.
Awesome. I'm sorry about my background. You guys were commenting on yours. I'm
Your
stuck.
background, dude.
But
Dude, they had white blinds. Okay, it just looked like their first podcast ever. And you know, his dad knew that he's been doing these for a while now. So come on, knock it off. You know,
nice. Congrats on the green tree hatchlings.
Thank you.
That's
Yeah,
awesome.
yeah,
Let's
that's
see.
super sick. I also thought that was really awesome. too.
Late. It's kind of late.
Where's he going? He's gonna go get it?
He's,
You might get one. Yeah.
he's gonna grab one.
If they're awake.
Wow, perfect.
Oh my
Well,
god.
Brandon, thanks for being here tonight, man. Super stoked to have you. We appreciate your time and you hanging out with us tonight and kind of us getting to know you more and us picking your brain about the monitor.
Yeah. My pleasure.
Where in Canada are you about?
I'm about 45 minutes east of Toronto.
Cool. So you're
So in Ontario.
cold Canada side. You're in the
Yeah, cool. We're sitting at 10 degrees below zero Celsius. That is, whatever that is in Fahrenheit.
Damn, you been to Toronto, Des?
Yeah, I met him in Canada at the show.
Yeah,
Yep,
Yeah.
Brandon,
Yeah.
that's
that's right.
That's sick.
With Forrest. Yeah.
At the RBE with Forrest. That's right.
Mhm.
So cool.
I know that was 3 years ago now, I guess. Yeah, probably.
Almost. Yeah, because I was pregnant on that trip and my
That's
son's too.
Yeah.
Here we
Little
go.
Prasinus.
Oh yeah, look at that.
Man, go Steven.
Little blue guy. Even
Yeah,
though-
that is looking blue.
Yeah, I mean, when they hatched, it was like you thought we hatched McCrae. Like they were super freaking blue. So,
That's crazy.
but yeah, so 4 babies, all of them doing perfect. They've probably doubled in size since they hatched a month ago or so. So
Yeah,
you throw crickets in there, and you see 2 of them ripping them apart from each other and all that. And so yeah.
Greens are the best babies for sure, man. The least problematic I find out of all the trees. So they're great.
Now, why
That's all.
would you say that, Brandon? Like, what is it about the difference in those two? If you don't, or
I haven't hatched too many yellows, but I've hatched quite a few blues and quite a few greens and a few blacks now. And for whatever reason, I have to separate blues and blacks. The babies, you cannot keep them together with really much success. There's always one that's going to be the submissive, one that's going to be the dominant, and it really catches up with them quickly. So blues and blacks, I have to separate them out. So I have all these baby tree monitors and 3-foot enclosures individually. But greens, they are happier than pigs and shit to be together, and they do well. And that I thank God for that, because they all do well, man. And I don't know what it is. I don't know why that is. It just the blues especially can be really touchy if you try and put a 2 to 3 in an enclosure, even if it's a big one, man. I find that they still just for safety's sake, right, and the health of the babies, I always separate them out.
Have you ever had any babies like rip limbs off or bite parts of tails off or anything like that?
Not off each other. I've never actually seen them physically bite each other and chase each other around in a dominance thing. It's all, I think, I'm not looking at them all day, every day either, but I think it's a lot of just posturing and one just knows that guy's bigger than me and it'll kick the crap out of me. So I'm going to hide all the time. I think that's more of it. If I'm holding 2 tree monitors in my hand for a photo, like I posted a small video of the 4 black trees that I hatched there a couple months ago, and they were all in my hand and they're biting each other. And I took the video down because I was like, yeah, I know there's going to be some people that are probably watching this going, damn, look at those things. They're ripping each other apart. But I don't think they have the power, like the little guys, to really do much damage to each other. Sure. But no, I've never seen them actually like physically rolling around in the cage, fighting each other that way.
It's more just like one will get bullied food. As far as why you don't race together.
Yeah, from what I've seen, and I mean, for all the monitors that I work with, I'm tree monitors are sort of the biggest of the species that I work with. It's all, it's not physical aggression. It's almost like just they're so visually aware that. It's all that posturing in the enclosure, positioning on branches and things like that tells the tale to the other ones, right? So that's kind of what I see. I mean, what I've witnessed anyways.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Brandon, I have to ask, because,
Sure.
I asked Steven and Desiree this, like, when I first met them too, because what you guys work with in general is so unique, but it's so dreamy, man. And I wanted to know, Brandon, on how this landed in your lap. Like, how did you end up working with monitors, but then yet pick tree monitors to be like the main focus of your keeping here?
Oh, okay. Well, I mean, just like everyone, right? I mean, I'm 40 years old now, but when I was a kid, obviously everybody has that passion, and then you see reptiles and like, holy, look at these things, man. And for me up here, there's like a handful of reptile species that I can go out and catch myself, right? So everything I would see in books, and I was always fascinated by stuff, and progress through the typical arrangement, veiled chameleons, bearded dragons, some geckos, and then I got my first ridge-tailed monitors back in, I think, like 1999, and because they really fascinated me, and then that was it. Once I had those things and worked with them, there was nothing else that compared, right? I mean, just behaviorally, intelligence wise, at that time, I was just like, these things are awesome. And then the fact that luckily for me, I was able to breed them the first attempt and hatch some babies. And I was like, oh, this is actually doable. And then, kind of perfected the Ackies a little bit, and then moved on to, red Ackies. At that time, they were different, red Ackies. And then, the holy grail of monitors for me back in the late 90s, early 2000s was the Kimberly rock monitors, right? And then I was able to get a couple of those and work with those. And I worked with those, and that kind of, I got pretty much all of the available Adatria. I've had them all, bred them all. I mean, I've even had Brevicata, right, which are unheard of in the hobby. So, I mean, I've had them all, and then I lost interest in a lot of the smaller stuff. Like, to me, some of the things like King's monitors and Cods and Gill and I, they're kind of cool, and I wanted to say I worked with them, but at the end of the day, and then you have other things going on in life where you kind of have to pare down the collection a bit from time to time. So I was like, all right, I'm going to stick with the ones that I love. And at that time, it was Ackies and Kimberly rock monitors and Pilbara rock monitors, and then work with those solely for a long time until probably, I want to say, about 2014, 2015. And that's when I got my first blue tree monitors. And, back in the late, well, I guess, 2000s, people were like, oh, tree monitors are impossible. And, very hard to hatch, very hard to keep. And I was having great success with Glauertai. And what really stirred it on for me was I was talking to this one guy who was pretty well known in the monitor community, and he was working with blue trees and Kimberleys at the time, and he was getting viable clutches of eggs from both of them, and could not for the life of him hatch either, right? And at that time, I was hatching lots of Kimberly Rock monitors. So I just said, you know what? Probably the exact same type of beastie in the egg. If I incubate them the same way, I could probably get them to hatch, as long as I can get some eggs. So, I Canada, we don't get a lot of variety in terms of the import market, but I was able to find some blue trees. I remember finding my initial female blue tree at a pet store, and it was insanely priced. And I had a male. I found the female at a pet store and got that, and acclimated them, I guess, and then put them together, and they started breeding and laying eggs, and the rest is history. Really, the blue trees, that first clutch of eggs, she laid 5 eggs, and they all hatched. I incubated them just the same as I would a Kimberly Rock monitor egg, a Pilbara Rock monitor egg. Have my little recipe, and then she's been going strong now for 6 years, and I get a clutch of eggs every 3 months from that female still of 5 eggs. Yeah. On average, 5 eggs. Crazy. And then literally though, her last clutch was 4 eggs, and it was 3 good eggs and one kind of runty egg. So I was like, all right, you've been a good girl to me so far. So I put a sticker on her cage saying, don't try and breed again until June. So I'm giving her a long break, right? Just to see, because I don't know how old she is either, right? She was a wild caught female. And so I have no idea. I figure I'll give her a break. Maybe she needs a break, or maybe she's just getting to the end of her breeding life. But since when I first bred them, I held back obviously the first couple clutches. So I've got lots of pairs going, and I've been able to supplement with some wild collected males and things for different bloodlines. And then, once I had success with the blue trees, and I realized, they're not that different than the other stuff, then it just opened up Pandora's box on the rest of the tree monitors, right? So, I've successfully bred and hatched blues, blacks, greens, and yellows. I'm supposed to be getting some Cordensis from Joe Switalski sometime soon here. So that will be cool, because I never see those in Canada ever. They've never come in. And so I'm looking forward to working with those. And I that was it. I mean, the tree monitors, once I got the blue tree monitors, it was like a whole new level of intelligence relative to the Odatria stuff. I mean, wow, It was like night and day. It's crazy. I mean, some of the stories that I have from over the years of how smart these things are, I'm just like, damn, they're crazy. So.
And then as far as you picking up on how smart they are, is that just something you just picked up with your experience of keeping them, or did you do a lot of research about, the monitors before you started keeping them? Like, how did that transition?
I don't, I'm not a huge researcher in terms of obviously when I started with Kimberleys and Ackies and stuff like that, I read what was available, which wasn't much. And, I had I was fortunate that Joe Lewis, the old owner from Rare Earth, we would talk on the phone. He took the time to talk with me, being a young guy at that time. And he was a good guy, and he gave me lots of tips and in terms of that, I think, I don't know. I maybe I just see them differently than a lot of people. I can read them really well. And I think, 90% of the issues people have with monitors not breeding, it's really associated with behavior. So if you can understand the behaviors and how they interact and stuff like that, then you can pair them effectively, and you can remove animals when you need to, and you can see the signs that one's not doing well, and all of those things. So I mean, I've worked with them for 20 years now, right? So I do have quite the the archive of things that I look for, to the point where last week I was like, why the heck aren't my Ackies starting to breed? Because usually this time of year they breed really, really well, right? And I was actually listening to your podcast, and I think it was, who was it? Was it Ron St. Pierre? And somebody was talking about it. I listened to a bunch of them. Somebody was talking about breeding Ackies, and they're like, yeah, the way you get those things going is you just start plowing the food to them. And I was like, oh yeah, I'm still rationing their food. Maybe I should throw some more stuff in there. And sure as shit, it works like clockwork, right? But those are the things that now working with so many different things, it's like you forget the simple, stupid things. But yeah, I would, I read what I could. I'm not super active on forums and stuff now. But yeah, I think it's just observation and really just kind of understanding what they do for me, being able to read those cues, right?
Yeah.
So that's it. But again, there's not a lot of good info out there, and on my to-do list at some point is to write a book or at least a journal or something about my experiences with them and do that. But like obviously I have Canadian Coldblood. I'm a high school teacher too, so I have a full-time day job. Right. 2 young kids. It's like another business as well outside of reptiles. So I'm like, man, I'm stretched to write a book, but some point I will.
Yeah, you definitely should, because you have a wealth of knowledge, and you were one of the main people that we went to Canada to see.
Yeah, I remember at CRB, you kind of just like, guys, I had never met Forrest in person, and then he just came up to the table, and I was like, oh, look at this giant guy, right? And he's like, hey, I'm Forrest. I'm like, oh, hey, how's it going? Because you guys had already got the yellow trees from me, right?
Yeah.
And, I remember I had no idea when Forrest inquired about the yellow tree monitors. I didn't know who Forrest was or whatever. And I remember I was using Jordan Russell in California as a distributor, and Jordan's like, hey, did you say something to Forrest? He was like, he said you kind of gave him a cold shoulder. So I was like, no, that wasn't my intention at all. I was like, no. So I got back in touch with Forrest. I'm like, sorry, buddy, if you thought I gave you a cold shoulder, man. I'm terrible at social media.
You guys talked forever. Like, I kept walking around and coming back and walking around and coming back. Like, he didn't want to do anything else. He just wanted to talk monitors that whole time. Like, that was it. That was the whole reason he went.
Yeah, that was before the CRB when you got that yellow. But yeah. So, anyways, we did talk lots after that. Now I was glad to see him at the CRB, and I know we were talking about coming to do the Tinley show, right? And I said to him, hey man, you got your stuff set up there. Would you mind if I came and piggybacked in with you or whatever? So we were talking about that at one point.
Yeah, anytime.
Yeah, I still have to do that show. I'd love to. It's just.
Yeah. When, yeah.
And the other problem is it's like my animals are CITES, so like the monitors, right? So I get them into the US. That's no problem. I have to find somebody to send them to, but then I have to be willing to have somebody to send anything back that I don't sell, if that was the case, right? So it's a little bit more challenging that way, but I mean, it's still doable.
Sure.
Yeah.
We'll buy you out.
I was gonna say, yeah. We'll sell what we want to, keep what we want to. Like. Yeah.
Yeah. No, that I'm sure that it wouldn't. I wouldn't have much to bring back if I did. And
no, I think we would maybe get 1 or 2 at most, but
yeah.
I feel like that at a Tinley, man, that would get a lot of attention.
Yeah, it would.
I'd love to, right? Because there's so many faces and stuff that names that I don't really know what they look like. I'm not a big social media guy either, but you hear the names everywhere, and I'd love to meet these guys, right? And people.
Yeah.
That's what's great about Tinley too, is it's like really, it's turned into the ball python show of the country, and like a little more of a variety based show where there's the ball python crowd, and then there's a crowd that's coming to see whatever shows up, like chondro tables or monitors or whatever might be there. One year someone had a clutch of blackhead pythons they brought and sold out like in 2 hours or something like that.
Yeah.
What's cool about Tinley is that there always seems to be that one display every year of like, didn't see that coming.
Yeah.
I feel like that.
Yeah, and it's crazy because in Canada we have such a small population, and it's I even consider it a really new market. Half the time when I have stuff on my table at an expo, nobody really even knows what it is, right? They'll pass by the blue tree monitor to get to this leopard gecko next to me or something, right? So it's so almost the hobby is very new here, whereas it's a lot more established in the US, and so that would be nice just in and of itself, right? I mean, the Canadian people are great, don't get me wrong, and it's awesome. I go to the shows just to shoot the shit with people, really. It's my kind of venue to stay in touch with the community, because like I said, my social media presence isn't the greatest. So the shows are nice, and I'm a face-to-face person anyways. I mean, it takes me half an hour to text a 3-line text, so it's nice to just chat.
I think excuse me. Most recently at the show I went to with Desiree and Steven, I wasn't even fucking concentrating on what was really available for sale. I mean, yeah, we were looking and found things, but I was so busy hanging out with Desiree and Steven, running into Patrick and just other people we knew, to where, you know, I didn't really have a game plan. Like, you know, where Steven had a game plan. He's like, all right, this is what we do. We walk 3 times around, you know, and like I should have listened to him because he had it down.
And reptile shows, man. It's not a game.
No,
I know, man.
Steven takes this shit like a fucking like it's a map, like a journey. Like it's like
competition. Reptile shows are competition. You get there, you do your first lap, you talk to nobody, you take your pictures of everything that you're interested in. After your first lap, you find a place. You're like, okay, you look at all the pictures, you get your priorities, you figure out the money, and then you go buy. After you're done buying, that's when you can hang out and, you know.
Buddy, I can't imagine going to Tinley and having to do that, right? Like, I want this, and this, right? I mean, by the time I got there once, I'd have the feeling that it'd all be sold, you know?
That's the problem with Tinley, especially when you're vending, is like, even if you're not, it's almost too big of a show to like truly get through in the weekend.
That's the problem, yeah.
And which is always nice because, you know, you end up not really spending as much money as you make.
Well, you probably have the same. I mean, when we have the big Breeders Expo up here in Toronto, it's like, you know, the coordinator will say, you know, what table do you want to pick? And I'm like looking at the floor plan going, okay, where are people going to come in? How are they going to loop around? You know, where do I want to be situated, right? By the time I figure all that out, I get the last pick of the tables anyways.
That's always our dilemma with the rodents.
Yeah.
We want the booth that's easy from like loading dock accessibility.
Sure, yeah.
The back of the convention center. So it's like, you know, do you want to be up at the front, have loading be a bitch and, you know, be in everyone's way all day, or be in the back where it's really easy, but like you're at the end of the show. Mm-hmm. That's always the dilemma for us. So
yeah, I know for sure.
I have a question, Brandon. If we could just, you know, get back to monitors here, Steven. Thank you.
Jeez.
Just kidding. I'm very curious because I always bug Steven about this all the time about, like, you know, enclosures for monitors and, you know, what's suggested and stuff like that. So what's your opinion as far as somebody who is barely getting into monitors, right? And, you know, they just don't have an idea as far as what the end result's going to be for the type of enclosure a monitor, like a tree monitor would need, or, you know, we could get into bigger species, but we could just stick to tree monitors because I definitely want a tree monitor someday, right, Steven? So, you know, I would like to make sure I have the right enclosure for it versus get the wrong enclosure and then figure out that I need to get the right enclosure. So can you give me like a little bit of some tips that you could, you know, suggest as far as an ideal enclosure for a tree monitor?
Yeah, well, you know, oh man, I see this question all the time, and everybody always gets flack for it online, right? I mean, you've all seen it a million times.
Sure, there's no right or wrong, right?
Yeah, well, and this is my point. I mean, I tend not to get into it just because I don't want to get into an argument with people. But the reality is that people when they ask these questions, they make these comments, they put the cart before the horse, right? You have to ask yourself what really is a healthy monitor. You know, what is a happy, healthy monitor in captivity? You know, active, good body weight, and number one, if you're trying to breed it and it's breeding like crazy, then your enclosure's good, whatever it might be. It's that simple, right? And I've been through it all, man. I've tried huge enclosures with tree monitors and Kimberly rock monitors. And, you know, for instance, like the real kind of aha moments have come with the Glower the Kimberly rocks when I work with them, you know, and I would have like 6 foot long enclosures by 2 feet high. And, you know, I'd sit there and watch these things and I'm like, yeah, they never use the last 3 feet of the cage ever. They're always under the hot spot. They always use the bark around there, right? The only time they run to the far side is if I open the glass on the one side and they scoot. So I started being like, well, for a breeder and for efficiency, I'm like, well, I can cut those down to 4 feet. And that's what I did. And it did not affect them in the least. They still do the exact same things in the portion of the cage that they were going to do, and they breed like crazy. So for a tree monitor, the same thing. I mean, the guys are making 6-7 foot tall cages or enclosures, and that's great. Heavily planted, they do all the crazy stuff, and I think that's a lot of the time it's more for the keeper and the aesthetic to the keeper than it is anything. But again, if your tree monitor is using that and breeding well and doing fine and doesn't have any health issues, then that's great. That's it works for you, right? And I saw this a guy up here did a little tour of my facility in an interview, and he went through my facility. And my tree monitor enclosures they're 4 feet by 4 feet wide by 2 feet deep, right? And I only keep pairs. I don't do groups, and I'll pull males out when females are digging nests and stuff. And even then, I still find that they don't use a lot of that cage, right? They're up on the top. They're using all the bark around the spotlights and stuff like that. So somebody on this forum said, all you guys recommend 8 foot tall, 7 foot tall, 5 foot tall enclosures. And Brandon from Canadian Coldblood, who breeds them regularly, his cages look smaller than those recommendations. What do you guys say? And, there's people, everybody was respectful and stuff, right, to this guy. And the guy was respectful. He just asked a legitimate question. And, people are like, well, it should be a minimum of 5 feet by, 6 feet long, whatever, right? And I just read stuff like that and be like, I don't know, the proof is in the pudding, so to speak, right? I mean, anybody who receives a monitor from me, or even a hatching monitor, I've sold some bigger ones too. They're like, these things are flawless, and that's what you want. If the enclosure that I'm using or that someone else is using is producing that, then I don't think you can really argue that it's a bad enclosure, right? I mean, my enclosures aren't small by any stretch of the imagination, but they're working. And I think there's many variations of enclosure that can work. It's just you have to have that prototype healthy monitor. What is that? And if your enclosure meets those needs, then there's nothing to argue about, right? Like, I don't get it. Exactly. That's it, right? If you have the healthy monitor and it's breeding like crazy, then
what's the issue?
Right? Yeah. And let's face it, tree monitors especially, they're super smart. So if they're not happy, they're not breeding. And I've seen tons of guys with huge enclosures that just can't breed them. And there's guys with big enclosures that do breed them too. So, if it works for you and the monitor is happy and healthy, then do it. Like, I'll give you an example. I had the black trees that I just recently bred, right? It took me forever to find good animals. I couldn't find, they rarely come into Canada on imports. And then a buddy of mine called me up and said, hey, I got some. And I said, I'll take them all. I want them all, right? Because I just couldn't get any good animals. And so I have my quarantine period, and I have my quarantine bins for them. I have them all separated enclosures. And the enclosures are 2 feet tall, exactly 2 feet wide and 4 feet long, right? Just 2-month quarantine, curtains over the front, just so they feel secure, nice and hot, lots of, nice, always fresh drinking water, just very simple. And that's all I've ever done with quarantining tree monitors, right? So I had them in these things, I probably had them in there for 3 months quarantining them. They were looking amazing, right? And I was like, I had one female in the bin that looked just great. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to put a male in there and just see what happens, right? Just one of them, because I got a few pairs. I said, I'm just going to try and pair one up just to see how they interact, whatever. I threw the male in. Within days, they were breeding, right? And 30 days after they were breeding, in a 2 foot tall enclosure, I got actually that clutch of eggs that hatched. And I'm looking at myself going, damn, do I take them out of here and pretend I'm doing a good thing? You know what I mean? Right? Yeah. Right. So those are the questions I asked myself. They bred, they're clearly doing fine. And, in the enclosure that people would be like, oh my God, that's way too small. And I know it's too small for, in my mind, I'm sitting there going, yeah, that's way too small for a pair, but they were still doing their thing. So to remove them from that quarantine setup and put them in a bigger enclosure, a breeding situation, that's hard to do, right? You're like, they might totally. So that's the deal. I mean, I hear people like this is a new concept to me. I was reading something on one of the tree monitor groups today. Somebody talking about grow tents, right? Like no grow tents. I think to myself, I don't know. I'd never thought of a grow tent, but if it's secure enough to keep a monitor in it,
grow tent. You said tent.
A grow tent, yeah,
like a pitch tent.
Like for. Yeah, like the reflective tents that people used to grow marijuana in and stuff.
Oh,
right?
got it. Wow.
Yeah. A grow, and somebody suggested that, and I'd never thought of it. And I'm not going to criticize an idea before I know if it works or not, right? I just thought it's interesting. If it's secure enough to keep the lizard in, then maybe, I don't know.
So, reefers.
Yeah, but for a tree monitor, I mean, the simple answer to your question, I'll use my enclosure size as the minimum. 4 feet high, 4 feet wide by 2 feet deep. That'd be a minimum for a pair. And then you can go up from there, I guess. I just find, the taller the enclosure, they never use the floor. I mean, they never do. It's almost, you don't need it. I mean,
no, go ahead, Brent. No.
If you're in it for like me, I have obviously many monitors and I have to somewhat maximize space, but I'm not going to maximize space at the expense of the lizards, right? And their well-being. But, for a facility, you kind of have to maximize space. If I can chop 2 feet off the bottom of the enclosure that they don't use anyways, then why not?
Perfect.
Right?
Yeah.
Makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, I kind of use this analogy all the time with ball pythons because, I get a little bit of shit about keeping them in tubs, but I'm like, well, they eat, they shit, they breed like it's clockwork. I feel like almost any animal, if they're not happy, they're not going to breed and be eating like clockwork. You know what I mean? So I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, what would that snake do in the wild? I mean, what does a ball python do in the wild?
Hide.
Right? Yeah, exactly. Right? They hide.
They go in a ball and die. They die so quick. Ball pythons can't do shit in the wild. They're worthless in the wild.
But they sit there. And they'll find a spot that has all the requirements that they need, or the right humidity, the right temperature, and they'll hunker down until something runs by and they can snap at it or what,
Yep.
The mental capacity of a ball python doesn't need the stimulation that, a dog does or a tree monitor does even. So,
exactly.
They're happy to sit there. And hence it's proven by the copious hordes of them being bred every year.
Right.
I mean, they're not a mammal, so if their metabolic requirements aren't being met in terms of temperature and humidity and that stuff, they're not going to breed, right? I mean, I get the analogy of puppy mills and stuff because, dogs will still breed in pretty bad conditions because they thermoregulate and internally regulate themselves, but reptiles don't do that. So, they have to have adequate conditions to reproduce. It's that simple, right?
Yep. Basically. Now, Stephen, I wanted to bring something up because it stood out. I'm glad we had a monitor keeper on, and I mean, apparently he can breed fucking tree monitors like a damn fucking beast. So let's bring up how your pair of blues are either just not compatible or like what we could like. Let's talk about that because you've been trying to pair these blacks together, right? Or what are we trying to pair?
It's both of them, the black trees and the blue trees. The males kind of just bully the females out of food. Both of the girls got really skinny. We had to separate the males out to try to beef the girls up a little bit. Both pairs were, the black tree pair were acquired as adults, captive bred, supposedly. I wasn't here when they were acquired. And then the blue trees, the male was captive bred from someone here in the U.S., and the female was wild caught as a subadult to adult. And they've never bred. From what we've seen, the female black tree was doing a lot of digging. Never found any eggs.
I think the male always got them.
Yeah, something like. And also another question I wanted to ask is if you had experience with males eating eggs. But what in our situation, what would you do with the pair where the females have been losing weight and getting bullied out of food and whatnot?
Yeah, I see it with the McRae all the time because I have several males and I have I have exactly like that. I have a couple males that are bullies and the females don't respond well to them.
Yeah.
And then I have a couple males that are just gentle and they get the job done. So I have gotten females to breed with the bully males, but they are picky. And you're right. I had one female. She was another import female that I got a couple years ago, just for some different bloodlines, and she was lean when I got her, and then I beefed her back up, and then I had a wild caught male who was a giant that I put with her, and she just didn't. I don't know. She just didn't respond well to him. So I took one of my captive bred males, one of the ones from my first clutch that I ever hatched, that I raised up, and he's really nice and gentle. And I threw him in there, and it was on. So, there is definitely some compatibility requirements there. And obviously, I'm fortunate that I have several males to work with, right? And on the other note too, my original female blue that I got her from a pet store. She was pretty lean, and for when I was acclimating her and had her quarantine, I did everything in my power to try and put some weight on her, right? And she laid. I remember when I first got her, she laid some dud eggs, and I was like, "Oh, that's a good sign." And she just didn't put on weight after that, really. She was skinny, and she laid 2 dud eggs, I think, and she just didn't really put on weight. And what I did was I finally, after 3 or 4 months, just gave up, and I was like, I'm throwing the male in, right? And threw the male in, and they bred, and she laid 5 perfect, amazing eggs. And then it was like after that first clutch, she filled out. It was just the weirdest thing. It was like a natural rhythm that she just needed to get into. So I wouldn't be worried about trying to breed a lean-looking tree monitor, because in my experience, it's okay, and it actually kind of kicks them into maybe feeding better and doing that. And then Bakari, like the black trees, tree monitors are notorious egg eaters. So if I have a male, if I know the female's digging in the nest box, then I'll pull the male out for a few days until he lays, right? Like I have a little trick. And what I do is because black trees, the ones that I have anyways, they're laying clutches of like 3 to 4 eggs. So they don't really show that very well. They're a pretty lean monitor, and they don't show that they're carrying eggs. Like some of the Prasines, I can look at them and go, yeah, she's going to pop any day. But the black trees, I don't really notice that too much yet. Maybe when they get a bit more established in my collection, or I get some captive bred ones, maybe. But what I do is I have the nest box, and I put a water bowl, like a big flower planter water bowl, on top of the nest box, right by the hole. And what happens is she'll like climb through the water, go in the nest box, get covered in dirt, come back out. And if that water dish is filled with dirt, then I'm like, okay, she's digging around in there. She's in there. She's curious. I'll pull the male out. And then when I pull the male out, she lays, right? But that's how for the Bakari, that's how I've known that they were actually breeding, is because, the male would defecate in his enclosure, and he'd defecate out an eggshell, and I'm like, all right, they're breeding. They're he ate the eggs, but they're breeding. So then you really know to pay attention, right? So that's
some good tips right there, dude, for sure.
Yeah. So can you kind of take us through your breeding process a little bit, from I guess start to eggs? How do you go about pairing? Do you cycle at all? Feed, temperature, whatever,
Yeah, for sure. For me, I don't cool anything.
Okay.
We have such where I live, I have, it could be 90 degrees Fahrenheit in the summer outside, right? Like super hot Florida weather. And in the winter, I'm sometimes 30 to 40 degrees below zero. So I get such a natural variation in, ambient humidity and barometric pressure that it's almost like it's a calling card. So all of my Odatria, they typically, I know to really focus on feeding the crap out of them. And if I have new females that I've been raising up, throw males at them kind of this time of year right now in December. And they really seem to breed well through December until June, July. And then they really pitter off after that. So all the Odatria, I get more seasonal egg production here, just with the normal, fluctuation that I get where I live. And at that time too, obviously I start, when females are I know they're breeding, I power feed them and stuff like that. Whereas the rest of the year, where I know they're kind of in shutdown, I don't really, feed them a whole heck of a lot. I like to keep them lean. And for the tree monitors, I mean, I go through the same seasonal stuff because all the stuff is in the shop, like my facility, and it's all the same. But the tree monitors, the more tropical stuff, they just have, a regular breeding rhythm, and I can count on all of my established female tree monitors giving me a clutch of eggs every 3 months. Like, it's almost like clockwork.
Wow.
Like, yeah. So all I do is I just, obviously for all of them, I say, okay, I caught them breeding on this day. I know to expect eggs 30 days later. And then 2 months after I get eggs, I should see them breeding again. And then 3 months, I'll get another clutch of eggs. And it's the Bakari are on the exact same cycle as the green trees and the blue trees. It's almost like clockwork now. I don't even have to worry about it until I get in these few days within this month, which is 3 months from the last clutch. Then I can start really focusing on them,
Yeah.
So, yeah, and I always do pairs. I never do trios. Because again, there's a lot of behavioral stuff that happens between females that could ruin a good female. Again, they're smart, right? So I see people keeping, 1.2, and that for Odatria, that was I don't know, I'm going to call it a rumor, but that was some stuff that was said years ago, back in the late 90s or, mid 90s. People like, oh, you got to keep them in trios and they sex themselves. So people just habitually keep things in trios. And, in my experience, it never works out. You'll always get a female that is a mediocre egg layer or never lays eggs. And, if you don't, people are like, oh, I always get 1.2. And I'm like, no, you don't really. You just get one subordinate male that, you get a subordinate male that looks female because it's suppressing male characteristics. So you take that subordinate male out and you put him by itself, and all of a sudden overnight it goes boom, it gets shoulders, and it's, nature's funny that way. So I always do pairs, and I always raise them up individually. And I raised them up for a long time, like Kimberly rock monitors, right? The knowledge is, they could breed at a year. They could breed at 9 months. Yeah, they sure can, and they'll give you a clutch of eggs that's maybe 3 or 4 eggs, and you won't get another clutch for another 3 or 4 months, right? And I raised my Kims up for at least a year and a half, sometimes 2 years. And then I have this massive female that's ready to pop, and they don't lay dud eggs. I very rarely ever get a dud clutch. And when I throw the males on them this time of year, like when I initially pair them up, I'm getting like a clutch of eggs a month from those things. And they're laying, anywhere from, I've gotten clutches as big as 13 eggs. So they lay anywhere from 8 to 13 eggs. Yeah. So I know it's like, it's easy for me to sit here and be like, yeah, wait 2 years, because for me, I always have stuff on grow up mode and all this, right? And I can wait, right? I put things in an enclosure and write the date on it. 2 years later, okay, you're ready to breed. But for somebody that has their first pair of Kimberly rock monitors, let's say, obviously their goal is to try and breed it, and they just get, I see it all the time. They get so antsy, they throw them together. And in my opinion, it does really ruin the reproductive life of a female to try and breed them too early. So, that's what so I raise them up always separately, so I know exactly there's no competition, there's no stress, all of that stuff. And then I introduce them. And honestly, as long as you have a known male and a known female, and at least of all the species that I work with, all the tree monitors, all the Odatria, with the exception of stores, if you pair a male and a female together, there might be a little posturing and stuff, but after 24 hours, it's done and they're fine. They never rip each other apart like you hear horror stories. When you get animals ripping each other apart, it means you have 2 of the same gender. When you have one Kimberly rock or one Aki or one Pilbara or whatever chasing one around the enclosure constantly, that's not breeding behavior. That's 2 males trying to fight it out, right? So I never have a problem introducing them. And I know it's patience, but I think that's one of the biggest things. Get your animals to a good size and then try and breed them, right? Yeah.
Are monitors pretty easy to sex or to tell? Okay, that's another female.
Yeah, it depends. It depends on the species for sure. Like Pilbara rock monitors, I can sex out of the egg, like literally. The contrast in the pattern out of the egg is, and especially in the neck and stuff, I'm pretty good at sexing them almost right out of the egg. I mean, obviously, I'm going to verify that before I sell them, but I know if I need some females to hold back, and I go through, I need that one, and I'll hold those ones and grow them up, and I'm almost always right. The other stuff like Kimberleys and Ackies, you have to get a bit of size on them. I do have a trick with with some. I don't want to say it on the air though. With the Kimberleys and Pilbaras, I have another.
It's unfiltered.
Something that I've been working on. It has to do with the tail bands, and I'll leave it at that. But it's almost always accurate.
How do you sex the tree monitors?
I have to raise them up probably 3-4 months. Basically what happens with the tree monitors is that they reach a certain age where the hemipenes are differentiable between the hemipenes and the hemiclitori, right? And I can pop them, right? Delicately, obviously, but you can pop a tree monitor and you can see. It's that easy, right? I mean, if you couldn't just by looking at it, right? Like, I mean, by the time they get 4, 5, 6 months old, it should be pretty obvious just in bulges anyways. But yeah, so I mean, tree monitors evert when you pick them up, right? But sometimes that throws people off. So, the wild collected specimens, if they're really emaciated and stuff too, oftentimes males don't show like males should. So you might have to pop them a little bit. And, I know that's not necessarily favorable with everybody, but any animal that I've kept for myself and bred, and I've popped it. So, I mean, I can do it safely and effectively, and it's quite easy, really. It's like so, yeah.
That's crazy.
So head size, is that a thing with sex?
Yeah, but, that really shows itself more when they're, like, mature. I mean, it's hard to put, if you had 5 blue tree monitors in a bin and looked down at them, you can kind of tell by pattern and stuff. But if you're just looking at one, it's hard to say, oh, yeah, there is some neck variation in them, like in the webbing of the pattern, if you want to call it that. But I wouldn't, at least in my experience, I wouldn't hold that to be true. I do find, though, that I get a heck of a lot of blue tree monitor females versus males when I raise them up. Wow. So, but yeah, but after that 4 or 5 month range, it's pretty easy. I've done it younger for people too, and it's been good. But I wouldn't, it's one of those things where it's like, I think it's this, but I won't guarantee it, right?
Yeah.
Right. So yeah, but definitely. Go ahead. Sorry.
But if they've been paired and they get along, you would assume that they are a pair.
Yeah. I think so. It's hard for me to say because I've never paired anything up that was the same sex. You know what I mean? Because I'm good. Like, I know what they are when I put them together. I've never thrown 2 tree monitors together. There are 2 male tree monitors together to see what's happened. I've never even done that to stimulate breeding because I've never had to yet. Although I've been thinking about it with one pair that I have. But I know with Kimberly rock monitors, when I put 2 males together, they have this really weird thing that they do. It's almost like one male will chase the other one around and only bite its toes. It was like, what the hell's going on here, right? It was the weirdest thing I've ever seen. So I was like, one's toes are like bloody and stuff. I'm like, oh, get that out of there, right? That's the 2 males. But I would say if they're getting along, you likely have a pair. Unless it's 2 females. You can always show me a video or a picture of the ones that you have.
We got our pair of Biak tree monitors that they're of size to be breeding now. One's clearly larger than the other, but never seen really any breeding activity out of them. But there's been digging. Mm-hmm. They weren't necessarily sexed. They were thrown together at about like a year to year and a half old. They've been together for probably about another year and a half. And one of them does have some more male features on it. I haven't gotten a great look at the tail base, but I think they were raised from babies. You'd think you'd have seen some breeding action by now, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. I mean, having said that, though, I mean, for some reason, the captive bred babies that I've raised up, and it could be just because maybe we pair them too early when we raise up the captive bred ones, but I'm starting to think that you don't really become receptive to breeding until like 3.5 years, the females, because I've had some paired up for a long time, like 2 years, all right, we're ready to start breeding them, and then nothing for a long time. Like I have a female blue tree from my very first clutch that would have been 5 years ago or whatever, that's literally just come into her own in breeding, right? And I didn't see anything. She's been with a male on and off for a long time, and so now she's starting to lay really good clutches of eggs. But before that, I was like, what's going on with this thing, right? So I think it could be a time thing. Maybe it's just too early for them. And and the wild caught, what's funny, because the imported ones that I've got and acquired, it's like they're already big. I do my quarantine thing, I pair them up, and they breed. It's the weirdest thing. And then my captive bred babies, so it's like maybe I've got to raise a bit longer, right? That's what I'm starting to think, anyways.
Yeah.
What would you think about the digging activity so far? And at least from what I've only actively caught the smaller of the two Cordensis digging. But she doesn't really gain any width in her midsection. But you were saying that you've had tree monitors that don't really show that they're gravid.
Oh yeah, like my Bakari, dude. If I showed you some of a gravid, like, and I know she's gonna lay because she's been in the nest box. If I showed you my gravid Bakari that just laid last week, you would never have known. Like, she looked lean, like look not super lean, but I mean to the average person they would have never known. Even I was like, well, she's in and out of that. She's got to be laying eggs, and she did, but it's like you would never know that. The digging behavior, I mean, that could be it too. Those tree monitors are pretty smart. So unless they know they have a suitable nesting spot, oftentimes they won't breed, they won't cycle. So she could be looking for something that is adequate. It says, okay, there's some place for me to deposit these eggs. I'm ready now,
Mm-hmm.
So that could be it. I don't know how much weight I hold in that scenario, but lots of people think so. So maybe, but it's possible. I find that tree monitors don't dig unless there's something to do with nesting. So if she's digging, she's definitely either she's digging for a nest, or she knows that there's a bug buried in the dirt there and she wants to get it. Those are the two scenarios, right? And I've seen that too. So
yeah, okay, interesting. So you think if they're digging, it's with intent. They're not like developing follicles and making test nests. It's like, no, they're finding where they're going to lay their eggs.
Yeah, I think they're like they're looking for suitable nest habitat for either future breeding. If she knows that this is my area, I want to have a spot. Like if this is her territory, I want to have a spot where I can put those eggs when the time comes. And they're either testing or she's gravid and you don't know it and trying to find a suitable nest spot. So
would you remove the male then at this point?
Yeah, if you after this, if you want to send me some pictures of the female, I can give you my best idea. Say, she looks like she could be, but I would remove the male. Try and remove the male and see what happens, because the last thing you'd want is to have him eat the eggs, right?
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, and like I'm curious, like how many times have we had clutches eaten unbeknownst to us?
Because we didn't separate the males. Like
with our the Prasinus, the clutch was laid on May 2nd.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like we caught him right away, because every day I knew I saw like she looked gravid.
She looked at
right. Yeah.
The day that she laid him, I walked in, I was like, she is tiny. Like she looked like you deflated a balloon.
Yeah.
We pulled them both out, digging, we found them.
The eggs.
And then about a month later, they were locked up again, but we didn't get eggs. So, and they haven't bred again since, or they haven't laid again. And one thing, we moved them from the room we're in now to a room right next to us, which is our like monitor exclusive room.
Yeah.
And I had a bad feeling that the move may throw them off a little bit. And I put a different kind of dirt in there with them that in the larger enclosures for like our laces and our Mertens and whatnot, the dirt was doing fine, but I think it's because there's more airflow in those enclosures. It's kind of clumping up, and I feel like it's not ideal, so I want to change it. but it just seems like they're totally thrown off. Do you think that the first time we may have just caught the eggs before the male did, and he may have gotten them the second go around, or and then if not, what do you think we should do to throw them back into that breeding? Because they're a very compatible pair. They're together. Yeah. Most of the time, they don't fight over food. Like they're a perfect pair, really.
Yeah, and they bred.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. I don't know. I haven't seen much egg eating behavior with the Prasinus, but I'm really in tune with my pairs, so I'll pull the males out. I do have one pair that I don't even bother because they just are so good together, and I'm not worried. And I know when she's in the nest box laying, and then I'm pretty much in there right away. So, for your guys, if she laid eggs and they were copulating a month later, to me that seems a bit early after egg laying, because
I may be wrong on that date.
Oh, okay,
I may be wrong on that date, but it was pretty short succession after she laid. It seemed like they were they were kicking, and but we didn't get anything after that.
Right. Yeah. Maybe you missed them. Like I said, mine seem to be on the cycle where they'll lay a clutch of eggs, and then they'll go 2 months with nothing, and then after 2 months they'll start breeding again, and then 30 days after breeding I'll get a clutch of eggs, and that's kind of the cycle mine are on. Hence the clutch every 3 months. Yeah. So maybe with the blue trees, I typically after a female lays, because I know the cycle so well, I will oftentimes leave the female alone for a month and let her just, gain back her reserves and then throw the male in. So that might be an option too. I mean, they're compatible. If you remove the male and you gave her a month off and then you put the male back in, I don't think it would hurt them at all. The move to the other room may have changed something, or the new substrate. Like I said, with the black trees, I was really hesitant to move them from the enclosure that they were breeding in, right? Because you don't want to mess that up. It's almost like when you find what is working with those animals, you don't want to mess it up, right? So,
I mean, they're in the same enclosure, but we didn't like wash it out or anything. I wanted to keep whatever scent was in there.
Exactly.
We had to change the bedding out just so we could move it, because the enclosures were taller than our doors. So you had to lay them down to move them.
Sure.
But something just seemed like it got thrown off. You think like a separation from each other would cause some breeding once they're put back together?
A lot of guys say separation helps them. Yeah, it will rekindle interest, so to speak. Yeah. I've kept pairs together all the time that have done fine, and I sometimes will pull the male out and let her female recoup, and then after a month and a bit after egg laying, like I kind of want to hit that window, right? If she lays eggs, I'll give her a month and a half on her own, and then I'll put the male back in, because I know at 2 months after egg laying they're going to start breeding again. So I want to make sure I'm there when she's receptive, or the male's there, right? So it could be. The other thing to really, really watch, and I tell this to guys all the time that buy babies from me and ask me breeding questions, is that like you move them to a different room, and you have to make sure that visually they're okay, right? So if you have an enclosure and it has a glass front, you literally have to make sure that those monitors can't see anything else, whether it's a dog, cat, other lizards in the room, snakes in a tub. I mean, they're that smart. They'll see it move and be like, what the hell is that, right? Yeah. So that could be something to consider as well. Like, I'll give you an example. I have in my shop, I have all of my enclosures facing the same way. They all face the west wall in aisles, so that I never have two enclosures facing each other, right? Because I've always noticed that monitors will spend all day at the glass looking at each other and not breeding if I don't. Or one will get afraid and never come out because they think the tree monitor on the other side of the aisle is going to rip their head off. So I have them all facing the same way. So the fronts of one enclosure are looking at the back of the other enclosure. So when I put everything in my new shop, I noticed this with my Audastria, and I was like, it was this time of year, and I'm like, man, the Kimberleys and Pilbaras and stuff, they're not breeding like they should. Why the hell is that, right? So I started just sitting back, kind of watching what they were doing, and I noticed that all of the monitors in the second row were looking out of the vent holes at the back of the cage to the glass on the cage behind it, And that's all I did. They'd stand there all day and look out. They weren't worried about breeding. So I literally had to put a blind over the vents so they couldn't see out. And as soon as I did that, within 2 to 3 weeks, I started getting eggs, man. It's crazy.
Wow. Yeah. So the way we have them right now, I didn't even think about that.
Yeah.
They're staring right at
each other.
Lace monitors, blue tail monitors,
Yeah.
Croc monitor.
Here's the problem.
Well, that's the thing is, when they were in here, the only time I ever saw them freak out at all was when the croc monitors were out. They would lose their minds. They knew exactly what they were looking at.
Yeah,
but where they are now, they behave the exact same that they did when they were, where they used to be when they bred. So what would you think about that? Like they're not staring. Their behavior is the exact same as it was when they were where they used to be.
But they can see like lace monitors and stuff.
They can, yeah, they can.
I mean, it could be something that you're just not picking up on, right? Like
it might be. We got way too much around.
I don't know. I would say that would be my first thing. If it was me, I'd be like, they're not breeding anymore. You can't see the laces. You're done. That's what I would do. Like I said, I think
shit just over the top so we can still see in, but they can't really see out.
Put a curtain down the middle.
Yeah.
Seriously.
Trust me, I've toyed with this forever, right? Like, I mean, how do I make the appropriate blinds so that I can still walk in the middle of the room and I don't have to flip it up every time I get to them? And that's why in my shop, I just had them all facing the same way, right? So one enclosure is looking at the back of the other. That's how I got around all the curtain crap. And then I ended up having to use curtains over the vents anyways. But at least it's at the back. Get them out of the way, right?
Yeah.
So
this changes everything.
It does.
Yeah.
But this is imagine fucking 2, 3 years, 4 years going down the road and not knowing this. He probably saved.
Buddy, I see it all the time. Like I see it all the time. And this is what I'm saying. Like when I think monitors. I mean, again, I have a lot of experience with them, but I really think they're easy to breed. They're super prolific. They're easy to breed. Eggs can be tricky to incubate. But all of the problems that people encounter are almost always behavioral, right? Like it's always visually associated with either cage mates or like, people like, they have a room and like you said, you have the green trees facing the lace monitors and they're doing, you assume they're doing fine. I don't know. Maybe they are. I can't say for sure, but maybe they're not. And people don't pick up on the cues, right? So I'm trying to eliminate as many variables as possible, and narrow it down to what works. And it's it seems to be the visual thing is huge, right? Like because you look at that cage or the enclosure with that monitor lizard in it, right? And you're like, well, it's behind glass, it's no problem, right? But those monitors sitting at the glass, looking across the aisle, they don't know that the glass is going to protect them. They don't know any of that, right? They just see something big and they're like, it hasn't gotten me yet, but what could it do? Who knows? I don't know what they think, right? But I just, I've seen enough visual stuff that I would start there. That's what I would say.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well.
Yeah. That's good.
It's on the list now.
Back to the drawing board.
Honestly, like you were doing everything right before, and that's probably one of the main things.
That could be the only missing factor.
I mean, they were definitely in an area where they could see other animals, but it would mostly be just like snake racks. So nothing near like what it is now.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's like years ago I used to breed frilled lizards, right? And I wanted to every time I wanted to go get a good photo of a frilled lizard, I'd pull out one of my black-headed pythons, like the old Reptiles magazine, and show it to the frilled lizard, and it'd go crazy, right? And it'd make a wicked photo.
Oh yeah.
You could imagine that situation 24/7, right? The frilled dragon's not gonna. The frilled lizard is not going to frill out 24/7, but it's going to lay there on a branch and go, Christ, I hope it doesn't see me. Right?
Yeah.
So we do with ours. If we want a cool picture, we croc monitor, and they're like,
yeah, exactly.
Oh my gosh. That's so funny. I have a question as far as like you socializing with them. I mean, is that like a huge thing for you? Socialization with your monitor and making them like I guess handleable or I don't know. But I mean, is that because and I understand after seeing Reptex tree monitors, they're not really the most cuddly thing in the world. You know what I mean? They're not like a beautiful noodle, like a beautiful little ball python noodle.
Yeah.
So do you socialize at all with your monitors at all?
I mean, the degree to which I socialize is me just going in and feeding them, and they do recognize me as an individual. They recognize that I represent food and I'm not a threat to them. They're smart enough to know that. I do not. I mean, just because of time, I just don't. I have too many, and I don't have the time with everything else going on. I don't train them. I don't do anything. I have no problem with people that do that. I just don't. I prefer not to hold them.
Right.
Every time I do hold them, I wear gloves because I'm a wimp and I don't want to get shredded. And I don't need my students asking me, what happened to you, Mr. Van Asten, right? So I don't socialize them, but I find that just with working with them, just being in the room and stuff, they definitely, they'll come out of the cage if I have the glass there and I'll hold some food for them and they'll come right out on my arm if just not me intentionally trying to work with them or anything like that. It's just they do. Blue trees and black trees, blue trees especially seem to take a lot longer to become familiar and friendly with you, so to speak. Green trees seem to do it really well. So green trees, if you wanted to socialize your monitor, I think that's where it's at. So, but yeah, I don't. I mean, I personally, my personal belief is that I love reptiles because of their uniqueness, the oddity, the plethora of variation that they represent. They're captivating, and I personally enjoy them for what they are, not for being able to cuddle with me. I would much rather watch them, right, and let them do their thing, and that's the enjoyment I get. I understand people wanting to hold them and stuff like that. I personally don't think that they like it, regardless of how socialized you think it is. I don't think that it's their first choice to jump on your shoulder and stay there and be held. But, I think some are just more tolerant than others. So, but yeah, I mean, to each their own, as long as it's, at the end of the day, as long as it's healthy and happy, then, so I don't do it, but I don't train them. But like I said, in time, they come around, they all come around. Even adult wild caught ones that I've received, they come around to some degree too. So, yeah,
that'd be cool someday just to see a monitor literally just hop on your shoulder, and that's what it wants to do. Like, hi, I'm not here to bite your face off. I'm just here to fucking just sit here.
That's right.
I don't need food.
Hey, when my kids are gone and I retire and I have 24/7 to spend in the Herp building, then maybe I'll pick one and be like, all right, you and me, we're going to get real comfortable.
The content monitor. He was going to be the star.
I got a black dragon that's like that. Been with it every single day, pulling it out. But my hands are scratched up bad. I don't think you can tell, but they're pretty bad and they bleed a lot.
It is not good. I mean,
I guess we could bring it up, but she's very TikTok motivated. Okay, so meaning she takes her licks on her hands, regardless.
Is that why?
She just needs the views, dude.
I have the black dragons on there and they've done okay, but they don't do as good as like a snake shedding does. Because a snake shed is satisfying to people. So if you can
the weirdos.
A snake getting shed out, like that's what people want to see, or they want to see you get bit. But I don't do those on purpose. I just had a video that was filmed through my security camera and caught it on camera, and I posted that, and it went a couple million views. But really? I do love TikTok though. I do love it. It does better than my Instagram, so I have more fun on there, and there's more people to interact with me.
She has more fun on there, so
I'm gonna have to get on this TikTok bandwagon.
Yeah.
No, you don't. You're good. Trust me.
Man, I don't consider myself an old guy, but listening to all this all this stuff that's out now, man, I'm lost. I'm socially lost in the media world.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's better that way. Trust me.
I guess, yeah.
It's fun. But
Yeah.
my whole life.
I'm gonna transition this into something that it's kind of like, I'm new into keeping a certain species of lizard. And now it's not a Gila monster. Now, like, this thing is fucking hot, by the way. Like, I have a beaded, right? So I want to talk about the similarities with a Gila monster and a beaded because they look very similar. But I want to know what the differences are. Why are you guys laughing? Now what? Did I say something wrong?
It's Gila.
Gila? Whatever. Gila.
Focus
Me.
three.
Sue me. We can fight about it later. But yeah, okay. So what's the big difference? What's the big difference between the two? You there, Brandon? God, see, you guys freaking messed it up. Good job.
Oh shit.
He's over your guys' shit. Damn, our connection's been going. Oh, damn, he dipped out.
He got mad because you muted us.
Exactly.
That's because you guys were laughing. You know what I mean? I can't be doing that when I'm talking. It's just it just fucks it with my concentration.
Got a Gila monster.
A Gila.
I didn't say Gila. Gila would be a lot more embarrassing than Gila. So I mean, whatever. Gila. What if I would have said Gila?
That would have been funny too.
These are sick though, bro. These are really sick.
Jeez.
Do you happen to know, Steven, the big differences between these and beaded?
Well, so Gilas are from the United States. Arizona, New Mexico, generally.
Nevada.
Yeah. Wow. And then beadeds are Central American, Mexican, Guatemalan.
I like the Gilas.
Gilas are primarily terrestrial. They have a much shorter tail, kind of a wider set body, where beadeds are all semi-arboreal, much longer prehensile tail, more slender body. Beadeds get a lot larger in general, much darker in coloration.
You're so good at this, Steven.
Yeah, for real. Nailing it.
He's so good at this. He's got so much knowledge in there. It's not even funny. Like,
I love it. Yeah, I know.
Check it out.
He really could just out
in the wild. You're not supposed to touch it. And
Yeah,
I don't know as much. I mean, I'm assuming in Mexico and Guatemala you shouldn't fuck with them either, but especially not Alvarezii and Charles Bogardai, because those are very rare and protected, and you're getting locked up for fucking with those. So
I love it when you drop the scientific terms.
I don't even think I know the common names on.
Hey, what about the bites? Are the bites the same?
I think it's more like just don't get bit by either of them.
I think everybody's different to them.
But one's not packing more venomous than the other.
I don't know enough, but it's more like just don't get bit by either.
I heard it's like a hot iron on your hands.
I heard it's bad. I heard it could go through your whole body and shit. Like I heard it could fucking really.
You're miserable for days, and there's no painkiller that'll.
Yeah.
Do we have any communication with Brandon right now?
Tell him to go back to the link.
I guarantee his device died. He's charging his. Oh, here he is.
Okay.
Here's Brandon.
Man, it's
You
friggin'
good?
snow on the satellite or something. I don't know. No.
All right, cool.
I'm good. Sorry.
So I was talking about your Gila monsters here, beautiful Gila monsters, and I recently inquired Beaded Lizards, so I'm very curious as far as the differences with keeping these and like breeding them and whatnot, because I'm in love with these, man. Like I set mine up in a really nice enclosure, and it's fucking just using everything and eating like a monster. So I'm in love, man. And I ran into yours right now, ran into your Gila monsters. So I want to talk a little bit about these and whatnot, if that's cool.
Yeah, no problem. I mean, I'm by no means do I have the knowledge of beaded lizards and Gila monsters that I do of monitors, but I mean, I've loved them. I often said about Gilas and beadeds, man, if they weren't venomous, they'd be the most popular pet lizard out there. They really are cool. And I actually keep them relatively the same. Beadeds Beadeds overall, I think in the enclosure, they would prefer maybe a little bit more humidity, but both of them have. I mean, as people think of Gila monsters as being from arid environments and stuff, but I mean
Right.
the amount of water that they drink and then the time that they spend soaking and the moist micro habitat that they require. I mean, they do have. They do need water. They need fresh water every day too. I mean, they love sitting in their water bowls and so I mean, the Gila monsters, I keep them in enclosures as well, the same as I would a Kimberly Rock, maybe just a little bit like shallower. So like a 4 foot by 18 inch by 2 feet deep enclosure, and I have a big water dish in there for them to sit on, and same with or sit in, and same with the beadeds, and I'll put like a little micro habitat in there with some moist cocoa husk or whatever. It doesn't even matter what the substrate is, moss. And then they'll sit in there, but I mean, they're something that can dehydrate really quick. So that's something to keep in mind when you have them. And then in terms of breeding them, like I have them all. I don't keep them communally. I keep them all in their own enclosures and stuff. And I've bred them both ways, where I've cooled them quite cool. 55, 60 degree Fahrenheit, just to like really get them cold. And I've also kept them in the ambient temperature in my shop with no supplemental heat source, which is, at the base of the enclosures where they are, I would say that they're sitting at around 76. Okay. And I have a little spotlight in their enclosure, and they've bred the same doing both. So I don't even bother cooling them super cold anymore, and both beadeds and Gilas. I think the trick, and they're a lot like monitors this way, is they have to have a proper nesting site. So you can get them to breed very easily, right? And mine always breed. My Gilas always seem to breed. When do they breed? Oh, sorry. They tend to breed, I would say, end of May, early June. I always get clutches of eggs at the beginning of July. That's my schedule. And then the eggs hatch. It seems to always be around Halloween. So, and beadeds, they're on a slightly different schedule for me. I'll witness breeding towards the end of June. I'll get eggs late August, and then the beaded babies will usually hatch kind of beginning to mid-January of the following year. So, but the trick with them, and I don't know if other keepers have this experience, is that you have to have a good nest spot. And beadeds are a very big lizard. So to accommodate a big lizard and nesting for a big lizard, and monitors included, you have to have an appropriate sized nest box, right? It can't be like a little Rubbermaid tote that it has to cram in there. I mean, if it can't dig and make a little egg chamber, then they won't lay eggs. And I kind of perfected nest box size to the species of monitors, and I've kind of applied that, right? So I'll have I get all my monitors to lay in nest boxes now. I don't, except for the Ackies, because I have the troughs. I throw a ton of dirt in there, but even them, I use nest boxes. So for each species, I have almost like a specific sized nest box, which allows them to dig a burrow, curl around, lay their eggs, and come out. If they don't have those dimensions and it's too small, they won't lay eggs properly. So with Gilas and beadeds, I just kind of threw in the towel, because to accommodate a nest box that they require in a 4 foot long enclosure is almost, in my opinion, it's impossible, right? Because they ended up like just dumping eggs in the enclosure and never really using the nest box properly. What I started doing was, when I saw the females being very gravid and I know they were about to lay, again, you have to know the schedule they're on, but I would take a cattle trough, one of those big galvanized steel troughs. I'd fill it up with 3/4 dirt, like just black earth, soil, and sand, put a spotlight on one side, throw them in there, and I'd throw all sorts of like just slabs of plywood on the top of the dirt and stuff. And the substrate would be 80 degrees ish in the shop temp, and I'd have a spotlight on one side, and then I just leave them in there. And then they would dig down, they'd dig under the wood, and they'd eventually find a spot where they were happy laying their eggs and lay them. And that's what I've done ever since. And I knock on wood, the fertility rate in the eggs is great, because the females don't retain them. I find that if females retain eggs with the Helodermas, that I work with, then you have a high likelihood that those eggs are infertile. Like they don't do well. They'll die during incubation, and it's obviously very hard on the females too. So I have one cattle trough, and I call it a cattle trough. Those stock tanks that is a Gila and beaded egg laying chamber. I just keep it there, once a year for a couple.
I would love to see that. I would love to see what that looks like. So, like, if you could send me a picture of that, that'd be great.
Yeah, I'll send you a picture. Sure,
that'd be awesome.
So, and that's what they do. I have to screw the plywood top down on it because the beadeds can push it all up because the soil's so close, right? But they'll go right down. I mean, they'll dig 2 feet down and do their thing. And
you keep that inside the enclosure, that trough thing that you're talking about?
No, my enclosures are only 4 feet by 2 feet for all of them.
Separate.
So
okay.
when I know the female's about to lay, I'll pull the female out, put her in the egg laying trough. Try and do it as early as possible so that it's not like she's bursting at the seams with eggs and ready to dump them everywhere. I'm like, okay, we're getting close to that time, and I start putting them in there. And, you can kind of tell by how they look as well that they're getting closer to egg laying, similar to monitors too. So that's what I do, and it seems to work out that way.
What's the best way of handling them, like when you need to transfer them without like freaking them out, or like the less stressful way to like handle one?
Well, some people have beautiful Gilas and beadeds that are super friendly, and
not mine.
They just can scoop them up easily and just, here you go, put it in the new enclosure, right? I mean, my beadeds are awful because
my guy's fucking evil.
I'll find that they rarely bite you, but they will like bash their head sideways into your hand. I always wear gloves. My wife made me promise I would if I got them. So I've always done that. But I mean, just the best way to handle them for me is like I'll put my gloves on with the beadeds and I'll like grab it real quick and behind the head and grab it in there, make sure I secure the head and throw it in the new thing, and that's it. Leave it. But some people, like you see guys like Steve Angeli who have he works with his beadeds all the time. That's pretty much what he does, right? And he has awesome animals that are totally socialized, and they're like puppies, really. And beadeds are worse than Gilas for that by far. Like, give you a story. We have the Canadian Reptile Breeders Expo up here, and I would always bring a beaded lizard and a Gila monster for display, right? Just to show Canadians what they are, because they're not super common up here. And Brian Barchuk would always come up and do a little bit, a little snake bites bit on the Canadian reptile scene. So he'd always come to my table to see kind of the stuff that I was working with. And one year he came up and he said, he's like, "Do you mind if I pull the Gila out and hold it for a little segment in my snake bites video?" I'm like, "Yeah, go right ahead," because the Gilas are harmless, I find, right? So he did his little segment, put it back. "Oh, hey, thanks." And he goes, "Hey, can I try and can I do one with the beaded as well?" And I said, "Yeah, you can, but I'm going to insist that you wear these gloves," right? So he's like, "Really?" I'm like, "Yeah, buddy, they're just a totally different beast." Well, he puts the gloves on, reaches in to grab it, and doesn't the thing swing around and grab the finger of the glove, right? And he's like, looks at me, he's like, "Holy shit." So he has to take the glove off, right? And the beaded lizard is sitting in the enclosure chewing on the glove for about 10 minutes before it lets it go, right? And that was that was kind of a one-off, but I'm like, "See, I told you, buddy." And I'm sure he would have been fine. Like, he probably would have pulled his hand away, but like, man, they're a bit different. I mean, at least the ones that I have, because I don't handle them much. So the beadeds are much less tolerant than the Gilas. But like I said, I've seen guys that their beadeds are like puppy dogs. So this comes with working with them, I'm sure.
Yeah, that's
but
good.
They are wicked, man. I mean, I love them. Those things are crazy.
Yeah, I love them. Really cool. Now, is there a difference between these two? Because obviously I see a difference. Like, I see this is a lot lighter, or unless it's in shed or something, I'm not too sure. But
I think it could be the lighting in those ones. Oh, you picked my ugliest Gila monsters to go to.
Well, everything else you had was in video.
I know. It's okay. It's all right.
Yeah, because if you go to, and which I'll put your link to your Instagram in the description below, because this guy beautiful. Like I didn't even show nearly like the closest hottest fucking Gila or that he keeps. His videos on his Instagram are popping. Like you got to go check it out. So
Yeah,
I'll put that in information description below for sure.
well,
Steven, do you have a wrap-up question for our man Brandon?
Yeah, well, I have one more question I want to ask. I wanted to kind of brain on monitor nesting. So obviously you said you use nest boxes. Do you supplementally heat them at all? What substrate do you use? How deep do you pack them? And do you give them more than one nesting option?
Okay, so for the Odatria stuff, like the Pilbars and Kimberleys, I have my nest box, and the nest box, the nest boxes might be 8 inches tall. So, and I'll pack in those nest boxes, 7 inches up. Nothing but washed play sand that I buy at Home Depot. It's nice and clean. It's like stuff that guys would use for their knobtail geckos, right? And it's just nice and clean. That's why my eggs always look for like the Odatria. And I just pack it down in there, and they nest well in the sand, and they love it. As long as it holds the burrow, it's all good. So you got to stay on top of that because the sand will dry out quicker than soil sand mixed. And then in terms of supplemental heating, I've set up the enclosures in my shop. So I have enclosures that are stacked 4 high, and the very bottom enclosure is like what I would consider a grow up enclosure or a raised up enclosure or a male enclosure. No breeding happens in any of the bottom enclosures because you're right, because the floor of the cage is cooler and I can't heat the nest box. But what happens is the second row of cages I start as breeding cages because the light bulbs from the heat source from the cage below warms the nest boxes enough in the cages above to bring it to that 83, 86, whatever. And that's all I've ever done. I don't have heat tape in there or anything. I just know that works, in that setup. So the top 3 cages are all the nesting cages, right? Or all the egg laying and breeding cages or enclosures. So that's what I do. I just utilize the heat from the cage below to heat the nesting substrate in the one above. And like I said, the nest box dimensions are pretty important, right? In terms of those, Kimberleys and Pilbars and stuff, right? It's kind of like I fine-tuned the nest box size for efficiency, but then to make them happy as well. So, and it's worked so far. But yeah, the substrate does need to be warm for sure. That's key. So however you get it to that temperature, that's up to you. But yeah, it definitely needs to be warm. And was there another part to that question? Did I answer everything?
Well, it was also like, is there more than one option? Right now, how we're doing it, we have like a thick layer of substrate in the entire enclosure that in theory they could use to nest. But I feel like we might be missing clutches because there's just too much to dig through.
Yeah, and that was
a lot of different areas that they could potentially nest. That, I mean, like so I'd say in our larger enclosures, like for our our laces or whatever, they're floor to ceiling. There's not heat underneath it. There's that, like, you don't want them to not like their nest spot and get egg bound, but also like I want to be able to find the eggs. Them. What are your thoughts there as far as having substrate all over that they could in theory dig in and nest in? Would it be better to like have it just be like mulch or something like that they're not going to want to necessarily lay their eggs in?
You know what? In reality, I don't think there's a right or wrong way to do that. I mean, because like you said, right, when you start having a breeding program and you have to start moving copious amounts of dirt all the time, it becomes a real pain in the ass. And then if you have a shop, I mean, that it has a second floor, even you get all that soil on the floor. That's a lot. So all of those factors were motivation to use nest boxes. But if you wanted to put substrate all over the floor, like of the enclosure, that's totally fine too. They're going to pick a spot in there. It's just how ambitious are you to go look for the eggs, right? And if you're just starting out, like let's say you want to try and breed something, probably would be a good idea to have deep substrate everywhere on the floor of the enclosure, because there's many options for the female to lay effectively. And if you're, maybe you don't have the knowledge of years of experience like I do, right? Now I'm to the point where I can say, all right, this is the dimension it needs to be. I place the nest box this far from the heat light, and it's over top of the heat light from the cage below, and I know that's going to work, and it works, right? But I didn't know that right off the hop, right? It was stuff that I have to learn. So what you'll see with your laces, let's say, is like you'll see the female always lay in one spot of the cage, right? She'll pick that sweet spot, and then you can say, okay, now I can take the substrate out of the other half of the cage, and you can slowly kind of narrow it down from there, right? Sure. When you get into the higher intellected monitors, or the more intellectual monitors like tree monitors and lace monitors and stuff, I have noticed that they're very individual in how they nest. So with the tree monitors, like I started giving them lots of different options, and most of my tree monitors, it's so simple. Like I'll have a nest box that's elevated off the floor of the enclosure about 12 inches. And it's just like a gray Rubbermaid with a hole cut in the top. You see it in my videos. It's nothing crazy. And most of them will lay in those things, but some females, and it's the exact same setup in every single enclosure. Some of them don't want to, so I have to put it down on the floor of the enclosure. But you'll figure it out. So when you're in the figuring out process, it is good to have several options, right? And with the tree monitors, like anytime I try and breed a new female, I'm like, yeah, I'll put a couple in there just because I don't know what you want. It's like Jackies and Kimberleys, they're not as intelligent, so they all seem to, okay, this looks good, and use it, right? So, yeah. And
part of that whole figuring out process, we have a big rodent company too. We unfortunately don't have time to be observing we have almost 100 species of reptile too. It's insane.
Yeah, insane.
But one thing that I've always thought about and considered, so the first monitors I ever tried to breed were Offenburg eye. And I got an adult pair, and they, I did everything that people told me to. They had bred them before. And they had their nest box in there. I had it under a light, so, they had the gradient. And I feel like I was always checking it, or adding more water to it, making sure that there was, the substrate was good. And the female was digging, and then she laid her eggs in her hide, and they all dried out the day that they. So I'm like, did I just screw with her nest site too much, where she didn't feel comfortable laying there?
Hey, you know what? And that is a possibility, man. Because especially with the Indonesian monitors, right? The tree monitors and Offenburg would fall in kind of that. They're kind of a higher order thinking lizard too. If they see you messing with their nest box all the time, it definitely will freak them out. You almost, before you go in there to dig out eggs, you almost have to be certain that she's laid them. So yes, I know. Like I can see the way my females posture even around their nest. When I lift the lid off the nest box and I know she's laid, even she'll stand there on the log beside me and like dorsally flatten herself a little bit, and she's like, get the hell away from my nest, So it very well could be that, right? She's like, yeah, why am I going to lay my eggs there when this predator keeps rummaging around, right? I'm going to lay it where he never looks. You never know, right?
And that's another issue I feel like we're having with our Dorianus, the blue tails, is they're together, and there's digging everywhere, but they're a semi-fossorial species too, so they'll just dig in general,
right?
And it's like a 6x7 enclosure where they could lay whatever she could lay wherever she wanted to.
Right.
And I'm thinking to myself, like, digging, am I just screwing up? Like, she's like, okay, this is obviously not how I left it, so let's go lay them somewhere else. And would I stress her into egg binding or something? I'm always thinking myself into fucking crazy with this monitor breeding shit.
I think especially like Dorians are super smart, right? So
super scary. Like you walk in there and you look at them like they freak the fuck out and try to hide. I'm just like, sorry, goddamn.
Yeah. So like I said, if you go, and I think that's when people have difficulty breeding, that could be one thing too, right? Like they just muck around with them too much. They're just in there. They don't appreciate how smart these things are and what they actually visually witness and remember. So I think you're best, especially when if she's ready to lay eggs or breeding, just kind of I set up cameras so I didn't bug them too much when I
started to do that. Yeah, the Dorianis is they hide all the time too. So like it's really hard to get a good from a distance, the male and female don't look too different. Up close, there's the male's a little bit bigger, a little bit darker in our case.
Yeah,
that's one where it's like she looked like she was developing something when I saw her out once or twice, and there's obviously digging everywhere, but you can just never get a good visual on them. I don't want to shake them out of their corked round and
Yeah, I hear you. You know what the other thing that I see people do, right? Maybe not with your Dorianis, but I don't know, like your Offenbergy. I see people say, "Oh yeah, I have a nest box. The temperature's all right. This is all great." And then you'll see a picture of the nest box, and they have a clear Rubbermaid tote or something, right? So the nest box has to be opaque. You can't see through it, right? If the monitor digs down through the soil and then can see light, it's not going to lay eggs very well. So that's like I build all my own nest boxes out of plywood, right? Just so they're somewhat insulated and they're opaque and they're comforting to them. Except for the tree monitors that I use that stupid Rubbermaid gray tote because that's the first thing I decided. Oh, that was one of the options I gave my blue tree monitor to begin with, and she loved it. And I was like, I'm going to apply that to everything else, and it seems to work. It's not in my mind, it's not the ideal thing, but it's working. So I'm like, again, you don't muck with it if it's not broken, right?
Yeah.
Exactly.
So
Des? You got a last question for the homie Brandon here?
Yeah. What would you say to somebody that wants to start out with monitors? Because I get that question a lot. Like people don't have them and they want to buy these babies. And I mean, what would you recommend, or a mentor or somebody to look up to besides yourself?
I mean, if they already had like a monitor in mind, like or a recommendation in terms of a starter monitor, and then go from there. Is that what you?
Yeah, that would work.
Yeah, you're obviously, if somebody's looking to buy a monitor, you want to kind of steer them in the right direction where they're not going to fail, and obviously you've probably seen this many times too, right? The typical starter monitor for someone is a Savannah because you could buy it for $20, and that's not the right way to go. But Ackies are a great option. Some of the smaller, like some of the Audacity like that, they're a great option. And then, the advice I would give you is like, really, I mean, keep it simple. Don't overthink it. It's hard because I think a lot of the stuff that's said on forums and that I read in some of the literature is not accurate or it's unnecessary. As long as you have your temperatures right, with a hot basking spot, whatever, 120, 130, 140, it doesn't really matter. The lizard's going to stay there either longer or a shorter period of time, depending on how hot it is. Security is the big thing. The monitor has to be able to feel secure, right? You can't have one branch under a spotlight and nowhere for it to hide. I mean, I know people want to see their lizards all the time, but especially tree monitors or monitors in general, they need to have a place to be able to retreat and feel secure. So, and if you see my enclosures, I have layers of bark. It looks ugly as sin, but layers of bark that they can weasel in the cracks. They can forage for bugs and stuff in there, whatever. So that security piece, make sure that they are visually barriered off from other animals and creatures to the best of your ability. And, I think another common misconception is humidity with monitors. I mean, you read all this stuff and people like tree monitors and Indonesian monitors, especially, right? People have these crazy enclosures with mist systems and stuff like that. And I think that's wrong. I mean, I get it. I get why people do it. And, because they have this belief that a tree monitor is from a rainforest, or these Indonesian monitors are from the rainforest. And granted, they are. I mean, some of them do have very wet environments seasonally, and that's true. But I really don't think you can mimic that properly in captivity. And what I mean by that is when you have, mist systems and all this hydration and wet substrate, along with that, you have to have the proper airflow. And if you don't have the proper airflow, you can't have the humidity. And there is not one enclosure that I've seen that anybody's built that would allow adequate airflow for the amount of water that people are using half the time, right? And I used to say this about Ackies. People would complain about their Ackies like not shedding properly, and their toes would fall off. Tree monitors, the same thing. Their claws will fall off, right? Because they're like, oh, I'm not shedding properly, so I'm going to hose it down. And the opposite is true, right? You need to dry it out because that shed needs to flake off. It's not like a snake. It needs to flake off. And if you moisten it, it acts like a rubber band around tail ends and toes, and it actually cuts off circulation and they lose claws. So I always tend to keep my stuff drier. Always a fresh water bowl, right? Always fresh water, but I'll only mist stuff every second day. And I've been doing that for years, right? Even the tree monitor, my tree monitors, I am on the same misting schedule as I am my Ackies, right? So I think that, I don't own a mist system. I don't, it's not necessary. And I think that's a common misconception. The whole humidity thing, if you're out in the tropical jungle and you get great airflow and it's pouring down and the ground is sopping wet, that's fine. You get great airflow, but it doesn't happen in captivity, right? You can't. So to find that balance between airflow and humidity is really impossible in the enclosures that we use. So I tend to err on the drier side. And I think keeping enclosures a bit drier will go a long way in husbandry, and issues that people see, right? So I think that's the big thing too.
So with your water bowls, do you just dump them in the cage and then fill them up?
No, so I don't like. This is how little I water. If I have a water dish for the tree monitors, and you go in there and I always drain it out in a bucket and then get rid of that water, because I feel that if I pour it all in the substrate, that substrate's just going to stay wet until the next time I go to change the water, right? Okay. Like I like it really dry. Yeah. Whereas on all my monitors, I just use cypress mulch in the substrate. For the substrate, if it's not an S box, just the overall substrate, I just use cypress mulch. And that cypress mulch is dry. I mean, it's dry to the touch. I mean, if you dig down into an inch of it, you might find some moister spots, but it's pretty much dry. They're not walking on wet substrate ever. Mm-hmm. Right? And that's an hour after I spray. But an hour after I spray, it goes into humidity, and that's it. It's gone. So and I see it like a broken record repeated everywhere. Humidity, it's got to be 80%, got to be 90%, got to be 100%. No, it doesn't. Right? You can't do that effectively. It's not sustainable. Especially when they've been living in the cage for a while. I mean, if you're going to clean it every week, then maybe, but you get wet substrate with urea and feces and forget about it, right?
Actually, part of our issue too is used to have like a mist system on them that would be multiple times a day and spraying them, try to get them to drink 2, 3, 4, 5 sometimes times a day. And when you change it out, there's like 2 inches of standing water at the bottom, even with the drainage layer. It's like you scoop the old substrate and it's just like
the trees was soaked all the time when we dug. It's
wild.
Not good either.
And like I said, I mean, if my enclosures are sitting at 60%, 65% humidity, on average, it's probably about what it is. To be honest, I don't even care. I mean, I look at the lizard and be like, okay, they look good to me. So honestly, like I people come into my facility and be like, dude, what the hell is this? My incubator is an old green refrigerator from an old cottage I bought. Right. And I just gutted it. And I've been using it for like my primary monitor incubator. I've been using this thing since I started breeding monitors, and I'm afraid to change because I consider it my good luck charm, right? Like the Green Baron. But I've built more since for the amount of babies that I'm hatching, but I still use that one, man. It's got a Helix thermostat in it still, buddy. That's how
Helix are gold. I love Helix.
I did too, man. I'm afraid to change.
All right, so Brandon,
I'll fix it.
Yeah, exactly. We've been saying that the whole episode. If it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Yeah.
Great.
Moral of this episode is
Yeah.
All right. So, Brandon, I want you to visualize for me, okay? You're going back. Let's just say you're 19 years old, right? With all the knowledge you have with monitors, you come across all of these. Okay. But you could only keep one and breed one and work with one. That's it. That's the rule. What route would you take?
Oh my God. What route would I take? It's tough. It's tough for me. You know what? I'd honestly. I mean, oh shit! This is a hard.
Shit.
I don't know.
I was gonna ask you what your favorite was.
Yeah, you know, like
one.
The tree monitors are newer to me, right? And so that has an inherent excitement with them. You know, I'm getting cordensis hopefully in the next couple of weeks, and you know that's exciting to me, right? So at that time, those cordensis are my focus. If I were to put everything into perspective, I mean, I have had Kimberly rock monitors now for 20 years, man. I love those damn things because they are bulletproof. They're like a tree monitor in many respects, even in their look. And it's you know, I see them every day, so they've kind of lost that, you know, honeymoon factor for me. But still, I'm like, no, man, I'd never get rid of those things. I love them. And, you know, that may change as, you know, 10 years from now, I might be like, oh, the blue tree monitor was my all-time favorite. So, I mean, I love them all. That's why I have them, and that's why I still work with them. Like, so, you know, the Pilbrensis I've been breeding for 15 years too. So, you know, I have longevity with these projects, and I do love them all. So I stay with them, right?
So you're saying blue tail is what you're saying?
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Blue tail would be my favorite.
Well played. Fuck yeah. Brandon, this was a great 2 hours, man. I'm not gonna lie. This was some serious monitor knowledge. I learned a lot.
We just scratched the surface. We didn't even touch on the Nephurus at all. Or,
you know. Well, you know what? There's probably more you know, more enlightened people on Nephurus than I am, right? But
I like this, man. I like the way you explain things. It really just kind of I don't know, man. You have a good way of talking about it. So and this is like Steven said, I'm pretty sure there's so this is
buddy, anytime. Like we didn't even touch about egg incubation or anything.
Oh yeah, we gotta this is what we call a round 2 worthy type episode. So we'll definitely gather up a second episode, maybe have you on with another fucking sick ass monitor keeping. I don't know. We'll see what happens. But yeah, man, thank you so much. I mean, before we let you go, man, what do you have to say to all your supporters? You know, for instance, like, you know, you got people who like Steven who geek out over you and whatnot. I'm a fairly new geek out over you as well. I can't wait to you know, keep on touch with your page, which, like I said, I'll put in the description.
Yeah, well, you know, I'm flattered that you know, people even care to follow it, right? And you know, I'm if people have questions, I'm more than willing to answer them. I will say, like, I'll apologize for my social media presence and oftentimes responses and messages, but you know, I have zero problem. Somebody says, hey man, I'm having a problem. Can I give you a call? I could chat someone's ear off for an hour. Right. So I yeah, I love it. I love talking about this stuff, and you know, I thank all of the people who have purchased monitors from me. It's great, and I'm glad I could provide them to you, and I'm glad you're getting entertainment, enjoyment from it. And you know, I wouldn't have the Canadian Coldblood if it wasn't for these people, right? So, it's just super nice that you can turn something that you're so passionate about into, you know, something that other people appreciate too, which is great.
Mm-hmm.
So,
definitely.
Yeah.
Thank you.
No, don't you there? Don't leave. Don't leave. Oh, he's there. Okay, cool. All right, cool. All right, so Brandon, I'm keeping my fingers crossed because, you know, obviously you talked about Tinley. If Tinley pops off again, if their place pops off on that Thursday, the week of Tinley. So I hope I get to meet you, man. I hope I get to hang out with you someday, which I'm sure it will happen at some point.
Yeah, you know what the problem is with Tinley, buddy, is the October one. It always falls on Canadian Thanksgiving. So we all, you know, I've got my daughters and my wife, and then my daughters are young, so they always want to get together with families. So Tinley's always come kind of second fiddle. That always falls on our Thanksgiving. But and then this year we were all set to go. I was like, yeah, we're gonna do the March Tinley too, and then COVID, and it was canceled like last minute, and then this year again in October. So if it happens to go in March and Canadians can actually go across the border, drive across the border, I will go.
Yeah. And we will make sure you go home empty-handed. Well, like cash.
Well, that's the thing. If
we'll
go,
your animals.
All right. Well, we'll make this back. If I do go, and I don't go to just visit, and I go to bring monitors, I'm gonna have to apply for CITES export permits, and I'm gonna have to send them to someone for the show. So, you are willing to volunteer? All right.
There you go, right there.
Sounds good.
And I'll be there to pick them up with you guys because I'll be visiting. Woo!
There might be a June Tinley.
Last
year, and then COVID canceled it too. But with the vaccine and all that, I feel like March is a no-go for sure. But June is a very real possibility. So
yeah,
June would be awesome. Nice weather.
Ow.
Exactly.
Yeah.
All right. Brandon, have a good night, my man. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Anytime, for sure.
We'll be in touch, bro. Have a good night. Happy holidays.
Yeah, you too. Thanks, guys.
All right.
All right.
Bye.
Well played, Stephen Cush. Well played.
Seems like
that was really good. That was really good. What was that, Des? I'm sorry, what?
Well played, Stephen. Well played, Desiree.
Because you guys are next to each other. I get it.
Oh, you mean because he got the guest?
Yeah, it's his.
Okay.
Yeah. Oh, obviously you did good. We killed it. I'm saying, well played on getting Brandon onto the show.
Yeah, good job, Stevie.
Yeah, Steve. Look, Desiree is like 10 for 10 technically on getting most of the guests, and then Steven fucking every now and then has to pull something. You know what I mean? So
yeah,
I just got.
I'll let him.
Exactly.
That was great, dude. I hope you guys took a lot from it, and like Steven said,
yeah, I could have gone for more hours.
Yeah, for sure. That could have been a 4 hour. That could have been the Dave Levinson length podcast.
I feel like anything more needs to be on the Patreon page. So speaking of the Patreon page, we're trying to go live, guys. We're trying to give out special content to you guys. So that being said, the first 10 Patreon members we have are going to be a part of a live that we'll do. They'll be a part of every single live that we have going on here, because we could do YouTube lives and send out special invites to certain people. So first 10, we'll go ahead and do special lives for you, but then we'll also give you a free Unfiltered team shirt as well. Okay. So the link to the Patreon page is in the description below, and let's go ahead and get that cracking, because we want to give you guys some content. Steven has the energy. Desiree has the energy. I have the energy. And we're trying to give you guys some special stuff. But then we also want some people to tune in during our lives as well. We miss having people. We miss having people to interact with. We love people having drop questions and stuff like that. It makes.
We're getting the best guests in the entire reptile industry.
Period.
On the show. I mean, who wouldn't want to be in those comments the entire time, asking them? Who wouldn't want to ask Brandon questions tonight? Well,
right.
Patreon.
Well, Patreon. You never know. I heard he's doing well. I ended up. What part of Brazil did Carl end up moving to? He ended up going to. I
don't know. Honestly,
he's doing some study, but I guess he's alive. He's doing good. So, but you never know. He might come back. He might come back with his visa and might pop through. But he's doing good. So.
Yeah, I think COVID has stuck there right now. But
cheers to Carl. Hope you're COVID free, buddy.
Population surveys.
Guys, good episode tonight. Thank you so much. Please, if this was your first time tuning in, please subscribe. Hit the notification bell. That way you're on top of every episode that we drop. These will be dropped Thursday mornings on a regular basis. And we have a special holiday Unfiltered Reptiles podcast being dropped next week for you guys. I can give you guys no hints, but the first initial of the species we're talking about is chondro. Damn it.
What?
Why'd I do that? Why'd I do that? Anyways,
was that edible?
Can you edit that out?
No, I'm good. They don't. Nobody knows who it is. God, there's so many damn chondro OGs right now in the game. So who could it be? Who could it be? So thank you guys. You guys are amazing. And everyone else who watches is amazing. The guest is amazing. This was an amazing time. So you guys have a wonderful night. Thank you for tuning in, and make sure you
up on all our tree monitor cages. So
Ooh.
peace out.